Karen bursts into employee break room screaming, "Where's the manager?" Doesn't realize it's clearly labeled staff only. It was a Saturday afternoon at Pinewood Home Essentials, the kind of home goods store that attracted both dedicated decorators and bored weekend wanderers. The store was packed with families, elderly couples and bargain hunters brushing their fingertips over towels, tapping on cookware, and peeking through lamp aisles as soft instrumental music played over the speakers. The scent of lemon-scented candles mixed with warehouse dust gave the air a strange balance of comfort and chaos. By the registers, a line was forming, snaking around the clearance display of mismatched pillows and slightly chipped mugs. Employees bustled back and forth, navigating their shift change in that awkward hour where the morning crew was eager to clock out, and the evening staff was just arriving, barely tying on aprons as they slid behind counters. The mood among the workers was tense but polite, typical retail survival mode. In the customer service queue, a woman stood out like a thorn among daisies. Mid-50s, tightly wound, with immaculately curled blonde hair, oversized sunglasses perched unnecessarily on her head indoors, and a sharp beige pantsuit that practically screamed self-importance. Her arms were crossed in front of a large designer handbag, and her face bore the kind of look that belonged more in a courtroom than in the return line of a home goods chain. Her name was Karen, though you wouldn't need to be told that. She sighed audibly every 30 seconds, dramatically checking her watch, shifting her weight back and forth like she expected someone to notice her distress and come running to apologize for wasting her time. Clutched in her other hand was a cracked ceramic lamp base wrapped sloppily in tissue paper, which she insisted the store had sold to her broken, despite the clear signs of wear and a missing receipt. The young cashier working the return desk, a soft-spoken 19-year-old named Holly, was trying her best. She had already explained twice that she needed a manager to approve the return since it didn't meet the standard return policy. But Karen wasn't having it. Her lips thinned into a severe line as she looked over the counter, leaned in like she was trying to intimidate someone half her size, and spat out, "Is there anyone competent in this place who can actually help me, or are you all just trained to nod and smile like robots?" Holly's eyes flickered nervously toward the clock. The manager, Renee, had gone on break precisely 10 minutes ago and wasn't expected back for another 20. She explained this as gently as she could, even offered to ring a bell to let her know when Renee returned, but Karen scoffed and waved her off. "Unacceptable. Absolutely unacceptable. I'll go find her myself," Karen said, her voice echoing through the lobby as several customers turned to look. Without waiting for permission or further explanation, she turned on her heel and stomped past the line, through the front registers, and toward the back of the store. A few employees looked up as she stormed through, wide-eyed but saying nothing. None of them paid enough to challenge a woman on a mission like that. Karen walked briskly past the bedspread displays, brushed past a stock cart full of discount rugs, and found herself at the rear hallway where a plain metal door stood with a large red and white sign above it. "Staff only" in bold capital letters. Below it, taped to the door itself, was a laminated notice that read, "Break room, please do not enter without authorization." Karen paused for half a second, squinting at the signs like they were written in ancient hieroglyphics, then sniffed and pushed the door open anyway. On the other side of that door, the world shifted entirely. Gone were the carefully curated rows of product displays and gentle background music. In the small, fluorescent-lit break room, the smell of microwaved noodles lingered in the air. A round table sat in the center, surrounded by 4 metal chairs, 3 of which were occupied by employees mid-lunch. A vending machine hummed in the corner, its display flickering weakly, and a corkboard covered in faded flyers, lost pet notices, and passive-aggressive memos from corporate lined the far wall. At that exact moment, Renee, the manager, was sitting cross-legged in one of the chairs, halfway through her sandwich, and finally enjoying a moment of peace after a grueling morning. That peace shattered instantly when the door slammed open and Karen stormed inside, her voice already at full volume before anyone had a chance to process what was happening. "Where is the manager? This is absolutely disgraceful. You think you can just hide back here while the store descends into chaos? I've been waiting for nearly 20 minutes. The words shot out like bullets, bouncing off the walls and hitting each employee square in the face. One of them, a stock boy named Jard, jolted so hard he dropped a chip on the floor. Another employee choked on his soda, coughing and blinking in confusion. All eyes turned to Cairn, who stood in the center of the break room like a general invading enemy territory, entirely unbothered by the stunned silence she'd caused. Renee slowly put down her sandwich, dabbing at her mouth with a napkin like she was in a period drama, not a retail break room. She blinked, still registering the fact that a customer had walked directly into their private space, completely bypassing every warning sign. "Excuse me," she said cautiously, her voice low but firm. "This area is for employees only. You really shouldn't be back here." Cairn's nostrils flared. "Then maybe your staff shouldn't be hiding here while customers are being ignored," she snapped, stepping further into the room like she was about to inspect the refrigerator. "I need a refund now, and nobody at the front seems capable of doing anything useful. You're the manager, right? Good. Do your job." Renee didn't move. The other employees sat frozen, eyes darting between each other. It wasn't just the yelling, it was the surreal absurdity of it all. Cairn hadn't just caused a scene, she had violated every unspoken rule of retail boundaries. For a moment, no one knew how to respond. Then slowly, Miguel, an employee in his 20s who'd only just started eating his leftover spaghetti, raised one hand. He didn't say a word, he just pointed. Cairn turned and followed his finger until her eyes landed on the bright red staff only signed directly above her head, painted clearly on the inside wall just above the door she had barged through. The silence hung in the air like a dropped hammer. She stared at it, jaw tight, then back at Miguel with a glare that could have burned holes through glass. But instead of backing down, Miguel calmly returned to his food, twirling spaghetti around his fork, while the others waited to see what she'd do next. Cairn stood rigid beneath the glaring staff-only sign, her mouth slightly agape as if the bold red letters were personally mocking her. A muscle twitched in her jaw. She was a woman used to being obeyed, used to her voice silencing rooms and her complaints triggering immediate action. But here, in this fluorescent-lit haven of employee anonymity, her power was unraveling. The employees weren't scrambling to fix her problem. They weren't tripping over themselves to apologize. No one was even standing up to greet her. Instead, they looked on in silent discomfort, one still chewing, another sipping a soda, the manager watching her with calm, practiced neutrality. It was not the reception she expected, and Cairn, unable to bear the vacuum of control, doubled down. She snapped her fingers once sharply like a queen summoning servants. "I don't care what that sign says. I'm a paying customer. I've spent thousands at this store over the years, and I will not be told to wait like I'm some common beggar." She tossed her broken lamp onto the nearby countertop like it was Exhibit A in a court case. "Your employee out there said I had to wait for a manager. Well, I found you. Congratulations. Now do your job." She ended the demand with a condescending smile, one she believed conveyed confidence but instead oozed disdain. Renee stood slowly, not out of fear or urgency but with the same deliberate patience one might use to approach a spooked animal. Her expression remained composed, though a vein near her temple was beginning to pulse. She stepped forward with the kind of measured authority that only years in retail management could teach. "Ma'am," she began, her voice as level as a balancing scale, "I understand that you're frustrated, but this is a private area for staff. You were told I was on break. If you had waited just a few more minutes, I would have been happy to help you at the front. But instead, you've walked past several warning signs and entered an area you have no right to be in." Cairn let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "No right, excuse me. I demand the right. I'm not going to wait while you all sit around stuffing your faces. What kind of establishment are you running here, where the customer comes last?" She folded her arms, standing square in the center of the room, as if anchoring herself in defiance. You people think you can hide in here and take your sweet time while the rest of us deal with incompetence on the floor. At that, Jard couldn't hold his tongue. He was usually the quiet one, always letting Renee or someone else handle the problem customers, but this was a step too far. He leaned forward on his elbows, speaking just loud enough for his voice to cut through the tension. We get a 30-minute break after 6 hours of standing, lifting, and running registers while being yelled at by people like you. We're not hiding. We're surviving. Cairn whipped around to glare at him. Excuse me, are you implying I'm some sort of predator? I have every right to expect timely service when I walk into a business. I don't care how long you've been standing. I didn't tell you to work retail. Renee stepped between them, her voice sharper now. Enough. We're not going to argue with you in our break room. I will address your return, but you need to step outside now. This is your final warning. There was a tension in the air, thick and flammable, and everyone in the room could feel it. It wasn't just about a broken lamp anymore. It was about boundaries, dignity, the basic decency that Cairn had stomped all over like the welcome mats at the front of the store. But Cairn wasn't done. No, I'm not leaving until someone takes accountability for this mess. I asked for help nicely. I was ignored, so I came looking. That's initiative, something this team clearly lacks. She took a seat on one of the empty chairs, crossing her legs and placing her purse in her lap like she was settling in for a scheduled meeting. If I have to sit here all day to get some proper customer service, I will. There was a moment of disbelief. The staff exchanged glances, unsure whether to laugh or cry. Cairn's level of entitlement had broken through into something surreal. She didn't seem to understand or care that she was actively trespassing. Her grip on reality seemed loose, like she believed her status as customer made her immune to rules, signs, or even basic social decency. Renee walked to the wall-mounted phone and pressed the call button that rang security. "Desmond," she said into the receiver, "I need you to come to the break room. Now." Cairn's ears perked up at the name. "Security?" she asked, tone rising in mock offense. "You're calling security on me because I dared to ask for help." "No," Renee replied coolly, turning to face her. "Because you walked into a restricted area, refused to leave when asked, and are now disrupting the work environment for my team." Her tone had cooled further, like frost on a windowpane, and it landed with precision. "You can wait outside, or Desmond will escort you out." Cairn scoffed, eyes flashing. "Oh, please. I'll be gone long before your so-called security waddles down here. But let's see how corporate feels about this. I'll make sure every single one of you is written up for misconduct." Miguel, still chewing, tapped his phone screen quietly. He started recording again the moment Cairn sat down. The frame was perfect, Cairn seated defiantly, the bold staff only sign clear in the background, the tension practically humming in the air. He didn't say a word, just made sure the footage captured everything. Within moments, Desmond arrived. A former military man in his early 40s with a calm demeanor and a gentle but firm presence, he entered with his badge clipped visibly to his shirt. He paused in the doorway, assessed the situation in a single sweep, and then turned to Cairn with a small nod. "Ma'am," he said evenly, "I'm going to have to ask you to come with me." Cairn rose slowly, clutching her purse like it was a shield. "This is ridiculous. You all should be ashamed of yourselves." She pointed a finger around the room like she was nomming enemies. You with the sandwich, you with the phone, and you," she turned to Renee, sneering, "you are the worst manager I've ever seen." Desmond held the door open. Cairn made a dramatic show of walking through it, muttering under her breath the entire time. "This store's a disgrace. Absolute disgrace. Just wait till I'm on the phone with someone important." As the door swung shut behind her, silence settled over the break room. Renee let out a long breath. Jard grabbed another chip. Miguel saved the video. And for the first time in 20 minutes, the room felt like theirs again. Back on the sales floor, Desmond walked beside Cairn in complete silence. his posture calm and professional despite the woman's relentless muttering. Every few steps, she glanced sideways at him, expecting some kind of acknowledgement, some flinch or reaction to her under-the-breath jabs about lazy youth, corporate betrayal, and the fall of customer service in America. But Desmond gave her nothing. He had escorted unruly shoplifters, drunk teenagers, and even a man who tried to bring his pet parrot into the store as a spiritual companion. But this Cairn, was an entirely different breed. She wasn't disruptive in the loudest, most dangerous way, but in the slow, acidic erosion of normalcy, a poison seeping into civility, corroding boundaries with every self-important step. As they neared the customer service desk, she turned sharply, her high heels clicking like gunshots against the polished tile. She folded her arms and planted her feet like she was preparing for war. "I want to speak to corporate," she snapped, her eyes locking onto Holly, who had returned to the desk and stiffened the moment Cairn appeared. "Not a manager, not a cashier, corporate. You will give me the number, the name, and your store ID. And if I don't get that refund, I will sue you all for discrimination, harassment, and emotional distress. Do you understand me?" Desmond gave Holly a glance, offering an almost imperceptible nod of reassurance. Holly, trembling slightly, retrieved the printed customer service contact sheet from beneath the counter. Cairn snatched it from her hand like it was a legal warrant, glanced at it with satisfaction, then turned her venom toward Renee, who had just arrived behind the counter with the broken lamp base tucked under her arm. Renee looked calm, collected, but there was a weariness around her eyes now, one that came from years of absorbing verbal abuse from people who believed they were untouchable. She approached slowly and set the lamp down on the desk between them. "Ma'am," Renee said evenly, "I've reviewed the item and unfortunately, without a receipt and given the visible wear and damage, I can't process a refund. However, I can offer you a store credit for the average current price of this model, $65. Cairn's eyes widened as if Renee had just suggested she take out the trash herself. "Are you kidding me? This lamp cost $120, and it was broken when I opened the box. This isn't some yard sale junk. Are you calling me a liar?" Renee didn't flinch. "I'm not calling you anything, but without proof of purchase or original packaging and given the condition, store credit is the best I can do. That's our policy and it applies to everyone." Cairn looked around, gesturing to the watching customers nearby, some of whom had paused their browsing just to witness the escalating drama. "Everyone. I bet you bend the rules for your kind of people all the time." The implication hung heavy in the air, and Renee's face turned to stone. Desmond stepped in then, moving to the counter with a subtle shift of presence that told everyone watching he was done letting this spiral further. "I think it's time you left the store, ma'am," he said gently but firmly. "You've made your complaint, you've been offered a resolution, and now you're disrupting our business and harassing the staff." Cairn reeled back as if struck. "I am the business," she shrieked. "Without customers like me, you wouldn't have a job." She turned to a nearby customer, a middle-aged man holding a box of bath mats. Tell them the customer is always right." The man blinked, caught off guard, and slowly shook his head. "Lady, I'm just here for towels. You need to calm down." Cairn's jaw dropped, her expression turning from fury to disbelief, as if the betrayal from a fellow shopper had wounded her more than anything the staff had done. But even now, she refused to back down. She grabbed her phone and began filming herself, flipping the camera around as she stormed out of the store, narrating her own victimhood like it was an Oscar-worthy monologue. "Here I am, banned from a store I've supported for years because I dared to speak up. This is what happens to strong women who don't stay silent. This is a travesty. I hope you're all happy when corporate hears about this." She didn't even notice Miguel standing to the side, casually texting the video he'd captured to his sister, who happened to run a semi-popular Instagram account called Retail Rage. Within 20 minutes, that video, complete with subtitles, zoom-ins on the staff-only sign, and a slow-motion moment where Cairn slammed her purse on the table, would be live and climbing the algorithm like a rocket. The internet loved a good villain, especially one so blissfully unaware of her own absurdity. Back in the store, the tension deflated like air escaping a balloon. Renee rubbed her temples, Desmond exhaled slowly, and Holly excused herself to the back to sit down and cry in peace. Miguel returned to his station, trying not to laugh out loud at the fact that his video had already been liked over 2,000 times. Jard, who had been pretending to reorganize throw pillows during the entire incident, looked up at Renee and asked, "So, think she'll come back tomorrow?" Renee didn't even smirk. "If she does, she'll be met at the door." "Bet she files a complaint," Miguel added from across the aisle. "She can file whatever she wants," Renee muttered. "We'll file a report right alongside it, and if corporate has questions, they can watch the footage." The rest of the day was slow, thankfully. A few customers came up to express sympathy. One elderly woman even offered Holly a peppermint candy and told her she'd done a good job. Word spread among the staff like wildfire, and by the end of the shift, the story of Break Room Cairn had already morphed into legend, complete with exaggerated voices and reenactments. There was talk of printing a copy of the staff-only sign and framing it behind the registers with a gold border. But under the jokes, there was an unspoken understanding among them. It wasn't just about the spectacle. It was about what it represented, how often people like Cairn walked into their lives, demanded too much, insulted too freely, and expected too little accountability. It was a reminder that they were allowed to draw lines, defend boundaries, and protect their dignity, even in a place where the customer is always right, had been shoved down their throats for years. As the sun dipped outside and the store lighting dimmed for closing, Renee gathered her team for a quick debrief. She looked around at the tired faces of her crew, people who worked long hours, endured complaints, and still showed up with half smiles and aprons tied tight. "I'm proud of you all today," she said. "You handled yourselves with respect. You didn't stoop to her level. That matters." Miguel raised a hand with a grin. "Even me, I was filming like half the time." Renee gave him a tired but amused nod. "Even you. Now clock out, go home and get some rest. We survived the storm." And with that they did. The next morning came with an odd sense of anticipation, a tension humming beneath the surface like distant thunder. It wasn't fear exactly. It was that strange cocktail of wariness and amusement that comes after a wild day in retail, when everyone's wondering if the villain from yesterday's drama might actually have the gall to return for a sequel. The team clocked in one by one, exchanging knowing glances and subtle jokes about barricading the break room door. Miguel arrived with coffee and a smug look on his face, proudly announcing that the video of Cairn's meltdown had hit over 20,000 views overnight and had been picked up by a popular meme page. They captioned it, "Cairn discovers employee lunches exist and loses her mind," he said between sips, holding out his phone to show a paused frame of Cairn Midrant, pointing furiously beneath the staff-only sign. Laughter rippled through the crew, even from Renee, who had spent the morning filling out an official incident report for HR. It was paperwork she knew by heart now, the same tired template of customer entered restricted area, verbal harassment, security intervention, all signed, dated, and shoved into a digital folder that would likely never be opened unless Cairn made good on her threat to take this all the way to court. But as the hours crept by and the weekend crowd trickled in, there was no sign of her. The morning passed peacefully. Holly worked the return desk with a little more confidence than the day before, flanked by Miguel, who kept her laughing with quiet impersonations of Cairn's dramatic finger-waving. Jard restocked light bulbs in the electrical aisle. Renee handled manager duties with her usual quiet efficiency, occasionally glancing at the front entrance but finding nothing more alarming than a grumpy toddler or a man trying to return a used air fryer. For a moment, it felt like the storm had passed. Then just after lunch, Cairn returned. There was no announcement this time, no dramatic entrance or shriek from the front doors. She simply walked in, striding with purpose, clutching a manila folder under one arm and wearing a blouse so aggressively floral it looked like an attack on the senses. Her lips were set in a tight, triumphant line, and she ignored the greeter's friendly hello with the kind of disdain usually reserved for insects. The moment she appeared, Holly visibly paled and stepped back from the register. Miguel nudged Renee, who turned, sighed heavily, and walked to intercept her. This time there would be no surprise, no stunned silence. They were ready. Karen didn't wait to be addressed. She marched straight toward the front desk and slapped the manila folder onto the counter with a theatrical flair. "I am here to submit an official complaint," she declared, loud enough for several customers nearby to glance over. "This folder contains a printed summary of yesterday's events, including the names of all involved employees, a timeline of offenses, and a request for disciplinary action to be taken immediately. I expect it to be reviewed by someone with actual authority, not just some break room babysitter playing manager." Renee didn't blink. "I'll make sure it's forwarded to our corporate office, but I need to remind you that after yesterday's incident, you were informed you are no longer welcome in this store. Your behavior violated several store policies, and we have the right to refuse service." Karen scoffed. "You think I care about your little policies? This isn't about store rules. This is about principle. I am a customer and I was publicly humiliated by your staff. I have every right to be here." Renee gestured calmly to Desmond, who had already been watching from near the self-checkout station. He stepped forward, his face expressionless, hands loosely folded in front of him. "Ma'am, this is a private business. You were informed yesterday that you are not allowed back on the premises. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Again." Karen spun toward him, eyes wild, voice rising. "Don't you people get it? I am not leaving. Not until someone takes me seriously. You think you can bully me into silence? I've already sent emails to local media. I've contacted a lawyer. And I have every intention of suing this store for discrimination, emotional damage, and—" Before she could finish, the front doors opened again and 2 police officers stepped inside. They didn't rush. They walked with the casual confidence of men called to deal with something they'd heard a dozen times before. Desmond gave them a nod. Karen froze mid-sentence, the shift in energy around her as clear as a dropped curtain. The officers approached, one addressing her in a calm but authoritative tone. "Ma'am, we've received a report of a trespassing individual causing a disturbance. Are you refusing to leave the property?" Karen's mouth opened, then closed. She hesitated, her eyes darting between the officers and Renee, as if trying to measure her odds of turning the situation in her favor. I'm not trespassing. I'm trying to submit a complaint. I have every right to be here as a customer." One officer nodded politely. "Understood. However, the store has already documented yesterday's incident and has issued a formal ban. If you refuse to leave, you will be escorted out, and further refusal could result in charges." Karen's face flushed a deep crimson. Her hands trembled slightly, the folder on the counter now looking pitiful in its impotence. "This isn't over," she whispered, though the fire behind her words had dulled. "You'll all regret this." "We'll take our chances," Renee said quietly, and the officers gently guided Karen toward the door. She didn't resist, but she didn't walk with dignity either. Her shoulders were hunched, and though she continued muttering under her breath, it was more to herself than anyone else. The moment she was out of earshot, the collective tension in the store snapped like an old rubber band. A smattering of applause erupted from 2 shoppers near the checkout lane. A third whistled. Holly laughed for the first time that day, and Miguel dramatically waved goodbye toward the glass doors. Desmond chuckled and returned to his post while the officers gave Renee a short statement to add to her report. The folder remained on the counter, unopened and irrelevant. Later that day, the staff gathered in the break room again, this time not to eat in fear but to decompress, trade stories, and share the latest memes using stills from the now infamous video. Jard had already made a sticker version of the staff-only sign and plastered it onto his water bottle. Miguel suggested making t-shirts. Renee, while amused, reminded everyone to stay professional, but she couldn't hide her grin. They had survived not one but two Cairn incidents in 2 days. And more than that, they'd done it with grace, composure, and solidarity. They hadn't let her chaos define them. And in a world where customers too often saw retail workers as punching bags for their frustrations, that meant everything. The sun had just begun to set, casting a warm golden hue across the windows of Pinewood Home Essentials, turning the reflective glass into sheets of orange and pink. Inside the store, the pace had slowed to a comforting crawl, the chaos of the day finally dissolving into the rhythm of a typical evening shift. Shoppers browsed quietly, employees finished stocking and tidying displays, and the register beeps were spaced far apart now, each one echoing peacefully through the calm aisles. The aftershock of Cairn's dramatic encore visit had finally settled into something resembling amusement. The folder she had so dramatically slammed on the counter sat in Renee's office drawer, untouched, its contents unnecessary and inconsequential. Nobody had opened it, not even out of curiosity. It had become symbolic now, a relic of her tantrum, as irrelevant as her empty threats. In the break room, a quiet celebration was brewing. Holly had brought cupcakes, still in their grocery store container, the icing smudged but cheerful. Jard had made a little sign out of cardboard and permanent marker that read "Cairn-Free Zone," which he taped to the inside of the break room door. Miguel was grinning from ear to ear, still watching his phone as the video views climbed steadily upward. Over 80,000 now. Dozens of comment threads were filled with people praising the staff's calm professionalism, calling them heroes of the retail world. One comment simply read, "That spaghetti guy pointing at the sign deserves a raise." It had 4,000 likes. The moment felt earned. In retail, victories were rare and often unacknowledged, drowned under quotas and complaints, long hours and longer shifts. But today, they had won something important, not just the battle against one unhinged customer, but the validation that they were more than just uniforms and name tags. They had stood their ground, defended their space, and reminded everyone watching that no, the customer is not always right, not when being right comes at the cost of dignity, safety, or respect. Renee sat in her usual seat in the break room, a cupcake in hand, her manager's badge slightly askew after a long day. She looked around at her team, this mismatched group of kids and adults who somehow kept the place running day after day, and felt an unexpected surge of pride. They had weathered something ridiculous together and come out stronger. Desmond had just stepped in, off shift now, sipping coffee from a thermos and chuckling at the sheer volume of Cairn memes flooding his notifications. Apparently, a coworker at another store had already printed a sticker of Cairn's screen grab and slapped it on their office fridge. Her infamy was now immortal. "I think we need to retire her folder," Miguel said suddenly, leaning back in his chair. "Frame it, mount it on the wall like it's a cursed artifact." The room laughed in agreement. Even Holly, still a little shaken from being the initial target of Cairn's wrath, managed a genuine smile. She looked lighter, more sure of herself. That alone made it worth it. But the finale to their strange saga wasn't over just yet. An hour before closing, as the staff began their usual end-of-day cleanup, a woman entered the store, not Cairn, but someone unmistakably related. She had the same hairstyle, the same sharp eyes, and the same purse held with the same tight grip, but her demeanor was different. She looked tired, worn out, as if she had come not to conquer but to confess. She walked straight up to the front counter where Renee stood finalizing paperwork and spoke in a quiet, level voice. "Hi, my name, Cheryl, I'm Cairn's sister." Renee's eyebrows lifted slightly, her instincts flaring, but she stayed composed. "Can I help you?" Cheryl sighed, glancing around as if ensuring her sister hadn't followed her. "I just wanted to come in and say, I'm sorry, I saw the video, my phone blew up with it. Friends, family, even my coworkers saw it, it's everywhere." Her voice trembled not with anger but with the weight of second-hand embarrassment. "She's not. Well, she's been like this for years. Always right, always yelling, always blaming everyone else. But this, what she did here, It crossed a line even for her. Renee softened. She could see it now. This wasn't an act. This woman wasn't here to justify her sister's behavior or threaten lawsuits. She was here because she understood something had broken. "You didn't have to come," Renee said gently. "I did," Cheryl insisted, "because you and your staff didn't deserve that. Nobody deserves to be treated that way just for doing their job, and I don't know if she'll ever apologize. She probably won't, but someone needed to." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small white box. "Cupcakes," she said, almost sheepishly. "I figured it was the least I could do." Renee blinked, then slowly she smiled. "Thank you, Cheryl." Cheryl nodded, her eyes misting just a little. "Take care of yourselves, and if she ever comes back again, don't hesitate to call the police right away. Trust me." With that, Cheryl left. The staff watched her go, the white cupcake box now sitting beside the register, untouched for a moment as they processed the strange but oddly satisfying moment of closure. It wasn't necessary, but it felt good. It felt like an acknowledgement that what they'd endured wasn't just a weird blip in a long shift. It was real, it was unjust, and it was seen. That night, as the last customers left and the doors were locked behind them, the team moved through their closing tasks with a rare sense of camaraderie. There was still shelving to be straightened, carts to be returned, receipts to reconcile, but everything felt lighter. Renee stood at the front window and looked out into the parking lot where the last car pulled away into the night. No cairn, no drama, just silence. Back in the break room, Miguel had already started designing a new sign to hang above the microwave. It read, "Break room. Enter at your own risk, especially if you're named Cairn." Laughter echoed as Jard tried to convince him to add a flaming sword graphic. Holly offered to make laminated staff badges that said, "Survivor, Cairn Incident 2025. Desmond promised to order pizza next weekend just for fun. The saga was over, but the bond it created would linger. Because in the end, it wasn't just a story about a difficult customer. It was about standing up for each other, about holding the line when it mattered, about reminding the world that even in a store full of discount lamps and scented candles, people matter. Boundaries matter. Respect matters. And sometimes, the best kind of justice isn't loud. It's shared cupcakes, a viral video, and a group of tired employees laughing long after the shift is done.